September 20th meeting of the Person County Board of Commissioners to order at this time and recognize that we do have a quorum, although Commissioner Gentry is absent due to pending surgery. If you so desire, join me in an invocation afterward, a pledge led by Commissioner Perrier. Merciful God and Almighty God, we thank you for the day you've given. May we look to you for guidance and direction in all that we do. Thank you for the opportunity of assembling to do the business of this county. Pray your blessings on those that honor us by protecting us each day in this country and around the world. Bless and protect them, bring them home safely. All blessings we cherish from you and ask in your holy name. Amen.
Would you please rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance? I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there any discussion or adjustment to the agenda as presented? If otherwise not, on a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carried. Item number one is a public hearing for the fiscal year 2023 Community Transportation Program application. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion to open the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carried. Mr. Kurt Newfang, to introduce the request, please.
Chairman Powell, Commissioners, I'm happy to share some good news with you this morning. It's always good to start the week with some good news. First, I want to note that our transportation drivers and support staff have done an excellent job throughout the pandemic. I'm proud of how our department has continued to provide quality transportation services during the many challenges that we have faced this past year. The good news this morning is we have an opportunity to submit a grant proposal for community transportation grant funding to support administrative and capital expenses for the FY23 fiscal year. The application is due on Friday, October the 8th, and the amount of the administrative request is the same that we have received this current fiscal year. The local match funds for our 15% for the administrative side would be a total of $27,994. Additionally, the capital request is part of this grant is to provide 2 replacement buses, and that would total $131,000. And the local match, the local share to go ahead and make that purchase would be the 10%, which would come from the county, which would be $13,100. For the grant award of $317,623, the obligation of local funds to support this would be a total of $41,094. The recommendation is for your approval of the grant submittal and the use of the local funds noted in the FY23 Community Transportation Program application request. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Board member questions?
Do we have any leftover funding from the CARES Act of last year?
We do not.
Do not?
No.
Thank
But
you.
we are hopeful that the CARES Act, that they might provide some further funding for this year. If that's the case, that would really help us out because that's operating assistance, that's 100%.
Right.
But we have spent everything that they awarded us this last fiscal year.
That's what I thought I remembered seeing on our breakdown on everything. Appreciate
Yes.
it. Just wanted to verify.
Any other questions? If none, then thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
We have public comments at this time. And as usual, we'll stick to the 3-minute limit.
Mr. Chairman, we need to vote on, we need to come out of the public hearing.
We did not have anyone to sign up to speak
Oh, okay.
in favor of
All right.
or in opposition to.
I'm sorry,
this-
I was-
In this public hearing.
I was reading down to that point. So anyway, good.
That's all.
Okay. We have a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Comment or questions? Or none? All in favor to come out of the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none, motion carried. Item number 2 is action by our board to consider to grant or deny the request as presented.
Move for approval of the application.
A motion to approve the application as presented. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none, motion carried. At this point in our commissioner hearings, we have informal comments and we, as I was stating earlier, as usual, we do have a 3-minute limit. I think we've got 3 signed up.
That's correct.
So approximately 3 minutes. IT staff will be our timekeeper on that, so. Is your
All right.
Madam
First
Clerk?
one signed up is Mr. John Seep of Samora.
Good morning.
Morning.
I appreciate your enthusiasm, Gordon, to get to the public comments. I was also enthusiastic. We, both you as the governing body and us as citizens, have profound obligations and responsibilities for us to have a lively and honest and sincere dialogue. And I want to thank Commissioner Sims for his closing comments at the last commissioner meeting, because he at least started that dialogue. So I'd like to continue that dialogue. While it didn't answer any of the questions that I've asked over the last 9 months, we did start a dialogue. Let's hope we can bring it up from where it started. So I want to address that dialogue and continue it. He made a point that he wasn't on an ATC advisory board and only for Metatronics. And I went back to my records because I don't like being told by my boss or those that work for me that I don't do my due diligence. So I went back and I found records from 2019 and 2020, Advanced Manufacturing Advisory Committee members, his name's on it. 2020, this record got changed to an Excel record and it resided on a server that I did not have access to. So in my browsing of PCC records regarding the ATC, which I was doing because if you talk to anybody in the community, you're going to get a different answer. So I said, I don't want to talk to any particular person or people. So I thought, let's just look at a bunch of records. So I saw there was an Excel file by the same name. So I asked for it since I didn't have access to it. This is what I got back. You can see it's fully redacted. There's no names, there's no email addresses, there's no phone numbers. So I went back to the source and I said, when I requested records, I requested that anything redacted be explained as to the reason for the redaction. 24 hours later, I got a file in PDF format. It looks like this. There's a difference. All the redactions are gone. And you compare this record with this record, there's one change that's also been made. Mr. Sims' name was lined out. So over a 48-hour period, there was that change. During my 8-minute dissertation in front of this board, I didn't make any conjectures. I didn't make any assumptions. I presented a number of facts. If you look at your, I believe the next speaker is donating. If you look at page 23.
Next, we have Mr. Cole Gertner.
Thank you, Earl. I think if you look at page 23 of your data packages, you'll see the notes from a month ago when I gave this presentation. I don't come here to waste your time. I don't come here to win votes. I'm not running for re-election. I did my due diligence. I'm sorry if that offended you, Mr. Sims. All I did was ask a question. You are the only person in this group that had a name that was associated with advanced manufacturing and advanced technologies over at PCC. And Pam Senegal had come and done a presentation and said possibly within 30 days, they would have land donated. So again, we have profound responsibilities, and that's why I'm here. If somebody tells me and attacks me as to my integrity, in my eyes, that's to do one thing, and that's to make sure I don't come back. Well, that's not going to happen. I got a few questions. You can choose whether or not to answer them. You contacted Beth Townsend. You asked her some questions. Was one of them whether or not PCC had gotten the land donated that they needed for the ATC? That was the only question I asked during that 8 minutes. Additionally, I'd like to ask 2 more questions. Not that any of these questions get answered, but Person County has over 100 employees. So I'm interested on whether or not the county, which struggles to retain employees, good employees, is going to put a mandate that everybody takes the vaccine or they're going to get fired. I have another question. I spoke to Lori Oakley last week, late on Friday. I spoke to Heidi before this meeting. I understand that there's a meeting coming up possibly this week. But we've been on a moratorium for the solar ordinance and fee structure to be modified. And as of late Friday, no one on the commissioners and Heidi has provided any further direction since the last meeting when the approximate 800 acres was turned down in Hurdle Mills. The clock is ticking, gentlemen. I hope that you're using your time wisely, that you're not just using it to attack citizens who come here with concerns, and that you, whether you look at them or not, are truly listening. And if you ask your parents, Mr. Sims, they will tell you that it's polite to look at them when they're talking. Additionally, we paid $62,000 for a feasibility study, which none of you have gotten. Do my due diligence. This is an unredacted one. If you look at this page, you'll see there's potential sites, with red X's and green checks. Okay? Please do not ever tell me I don't do my due diligence, or I'll turn this over as well as other things to the press enterprise, Mr. Sims. Since I texted you after your comments last board meeting, I'm going to leave these here. You can get them, George, if you like, but I do my due diligence. You should never treat a citizen, myself, or anyone else, or allow somebody like a past board chair call somebody a liar a couple of times during a board meeting. That is intolerable. Forget that it was me. We shouldn't be treated that way either, Mr. Sims, or any of you. We're citizens. You're paid to sit up here and listen to us. We come here of our own accord. And I take my integrity, my reputation, and my dignity seriously, as I hope everybody does. So I appreciate your sincere listening. The last speaker, I believe, was also going to donate their time to me. This is a serious matter. We want to know about vaccinations. We want to know about the solar mandate and whether or not you guys are doing your due diligence in making that ordinance and the fee structure what it needs to be for the people of Person County. And if you talk to Beth Townsend again, find out whether or not they got the land donated that was talked about getting within the next 30 days back in April or May. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Liz Bratcher, Samora. Do you wish to speak?
No, I don't.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment, sir.
Item number 3 on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Move for approval.
Any discussion or questions? Have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carried. Under new business, item number 4, presentation of comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year ending June 30, 2020. Ms. Warrenberg.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Commissioners. I am pleased to introduce Jamie Crampton and Jocelyn Edge, who represent the county's audit firm, Elliott Davis, and they are here this morning to present some information regarding the results from Person County's long-time awaited fiscal year 2020 financial audit report. Please feel free to ask any questions following the presentation, and we'll be glad to respond. Thanks.
There it is. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me today. We just wanted to check in with you and present the required communications from your auditors and audit the results for the June 30, 2020 audit. There we go. Today, I'm going to go over some required communications as we, the auditors, speak to you on a yearly basis. I'm also going to go over the audit reports and touch on some of the findings from the audit. First, I'm not going to go through one by one of our audit process that is in the report, the required communication document, but wanted to touch on a few of those required communications. First, during the audit process or audit planning process, we're required to reach out to members of management as well as the county manager and a board member as well to inquire of any audit risk areas or fraud risks. Most obviously, the fraud risk, if there was a fraud risk, that would be something that we would communicate directly to you. There was not a specific fraud risk during our audit noted for June 30, 2020. We set materiality when we're planning these audits. And so we can't look at every record, every check, every document that is processed through the finance department. But what we do is use our standards to set a materiality threshold to go through and identify material transactions to ensure that the financial statements are appropriately reported. We discuss with management the significant accounting policies that are put into place. There were some changes to those due to the cyber event that happened early in calendar year 2020. And so we had to document those items and felt that those items were appropriate in the situations that were facing management. There are minor unrecorded and uncorrected misstatements in our financial statements. That's a materiality threshold, but they are all considered clearly trivial, which would be under 3% of our materiality threshold. So we're talking about minor transactions that just don't get corrected. One example of those is a payroll accrual that happens each year, but you're talking about a day or two of pay. We don't make an adjustment for that. So that is what we speak about when we're talking about unrecorded or corrected misstatements, and specific details on those are in your communication document. After we complete the audit, we get representations from management that authorizes us to release the financial statement report as written, as well as shows an agreement towards the reports and the findings contained within them. Disagreements with management. If we had disagreements with management, we would be required immediately to speak with you as the governing board. We did not have any of those this year. We did discuss some significant issues with management, most of which are detailed in your financial report, but nothing that threatened the material correctness of the financial statements. For the audit results, our responsibility as the auditors is to issue an opinion on whether the financial statements are materially in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles, and obtain a reasonable assurance regarding material misstatements. Our financial statement audit is not designed to detect fraud. Management's responsibility is to prepare and present the financial statements in accordance with GAAP and maintain sufficient internal controls over the preparation of financial statements. The financial statements as a whole received an unmodified opinion. This is what you're looking for. That's a clean opinion. And that is the result of sound financial reporting. Our report on internal controls and compliance. We do consider internal controls over financial reporting, but we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of those internal controls. During our testing, if we do find a deficiency in internal controls, we're required, depending on the materiality threshold, to report those deficiencies. And we have. There were deficiencies noted and were documented in the financial statements. And I'll go over those findings briefly in a couple of slides. The report on compliance over major federal programs. So we're issuing an opinion on the federal dollars that you receive and expend throughout the year. That is how we identify through the Single Audit Act what needs to be tested from a compliance standpoint. And the county received a unmodified opinion on all programs except the Medicaid cluster. The Medicaid cluster received a disclaimer of opinion. And what that means is it's not an adverse opinion. It's not us saying there's something definitely wrong here, it needs to be looked at. It is more us saying there was not, the records were not available to be audited. And that was a result of the cyber event. DSS is working regularly to increase the amount of documentation that is on file for these items, but as part of the cyber event, some of this information was lost and was not available for testing. So lastly, I just wanted to touch on the findings. I know that you guys are very familiar with the findings as you have already responded to the LGC's request for direct response to these findings. I won't go through any of them in detail, but the financial statements findings are listed here. As you can see, the first one was over cybersecurity, and the following three actually were a direct result of changes that had to be made due to the cyber event. So Amy and her team are working diligently to put back controls back in place that had to be circumvented due to the cyber event. And lastly, the federal and state awards. Again, we see Medicaid findings and LIHEAP findings each year on documentation, but want to make clear that there were no question costs in these findings. So what happens is we go through, we do this testing, we say, hey, you may not have calculated this appropriately. Can you take a look at it? And what DSS takes that information, goes back to the client or the client's records and provides support that there was no question cost. There was not a payment to an ineligible individual. And that happened in all of these cases. They were able to confirm that no payments to ineligible individuals were made. I've added Tom McNeish, our shareholder, is actually down in South Carolina today doing another presentation. And my phone number here as well. If you have any questions after today, please don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us and we will be happy to answer any questions. Lastly, I just want to say that this was not a typical audit year. And I just want to thank Amy and her team for putting up with our requests, even if they were not doable on your end at times. We still have to make the request. And so Amy has done a great job in recreating the financial records that were lost. And also just want to thank Jocelyn, who is really the brains of the operation and does a lot of the testing work on the ground. So thank you all. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Board members have any questions? If not,
Thank you, guys.
thank you very much. And again, thank you, Amy and staff, as usual, for a great job concerning the finances of citizens of Person County. We appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
typically after a presentation of the audit report, the action that the board takes is to offer a motion to accept the audit report.
Mr. Chairman, motion to accept the audit report.
Have a motion to accept the report as presented. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. And motion carried. Item number 5 is update to ordinance regulating possession or consumption of malt beverages or unfortified wine or on county property. Mr. John Hill.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
How are y'all doing today?
Good.
So as you know, we've got a very big event coming to Person County. We do a number of events each year to try to showcase the county and the city so we can hopefully attract more people to come and relocate to Person County at some point. October the 5th, Person County is going to be the host site to the Mountains to Coast annual ride, and this is held by the North Carolina Division of Tourism and ncsports.org. We've been planning this event for 2 years now. We got canceled last year because of Corona, but we've been in the planning process for 2 years, actually a year before last year, before it got canceled. So this is a very big event. During one of our planning meetings, we sat down with the organizers, and we also had a conversation with a number of different townships to see what makes this event attractive to our tourists. And so one of the things that they said is when they cross the finish line, they're going to want to celebrate. They're either going to want to celebrate with a Coca-Cola, a Gatorade, or beer. So you might want to have something available for them at their finish line. That was given to us as advice by the organizers. We had another planning meeting with the Recreation Advisory Board on August the 4th. And then the Recreation Advisory Board voted unanimously to bring this to you guys to be approved. So to have that done, Ellis has actually already looked at the ordinance. To have that done, you would actually have to change your ordinance to say that if you have a special tourism event location that is going to have alcohol, then it has to come before the board to be voted on, and that would be each time. But we don't anticipate this is going to be happening too often, since this is a kind of a one-time deal for Person County, because North Carolina Tourism is going to want to choose other cities to host this event. So if you have any questions, right now we bring this before you on behalf of the Recreation Advisory Board that you change the ordinance for this particular event, and we go through the permitting process. I will tell you this also, that the ncsports.org, this is going to be a little bit different because they would actually bring the vendor, where we don't actually have to get involved with that. Typically, when we do things like this at either the Kirby, the museum, or Mayo Park, we typically are the ones who would actually go out and have to check with the vendors and make sure their insurance is okay and all the permitting process and all that stuff and security and all that jazz. This time, this is going to be handled by the NC Sports, and all we have to do is secure the insurance and the permit. So,
Any comments or questions of Mr. Hill?
Yeah, John, I'd just like to ask and remind me, the event, is this going to be open for, is there going to be the public, whole public there able to come and drink, or is it just for the people who participated in the cycle?
So this is just going to be this. So the location at the Hook Sansbury is just going to be for the actual participants.
Right.
So what we're trying to do is we welcome the riders in, and then once the riders get there on their bicycles, and then they've had their refreshments, they go take their showers or whatever, and then we want to showcase the uptown. So there's going to be shuttles running them uptown. The Hook Sansbury is mainly the main hub where they'll be staying for the night, spending the night. Okay. And just to give you an idea of their daily routine, I guess you'd say, they're going to arrive, the first riders will arrive at about 11 o'clock. The last riders are going to be arriving at about 4 o'clock. When a rider gets there, they ride their bikes in, they go by the refreshment area. There's going to be a food truck there. Then they go take showers, get ready for the evening event uptown. And then typically the refreshments on our end are going to be closed down about 6 o'clock. So it's only going to be that short period of time because we don't want them to stay there. We want them to go be shuttled uptown, show up, showcase uptown, and then they'll be back at about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And they probably will be in bed by 8:30 or 9 o'clock because they have to be back on the road at 7 o'clock in the morning. So it's a very controlled atmosphere. To be a very controlled environment. We do have police officers scheduled for that day. We probably have 4 officers on this particular site, and we'll have 4 officers, a couple officers back and forth up the town for the uptown events.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. So here is what is proposed in this agenda item number 5. Your existing ordinance is authorized by the Alcoholic Beverage Control Statutes in Chapter 18B of the General Statutes. Generally prohibit alcoholic beverages on county-owned property, but make in the current ordinance 4 exceptions to that. But there is no general exception for special events. So this proposed ordinance before you, the new proposed ordinance, repeals the previous ordinance, continues the prohibition under the new ordinance of the prohibition of alcoholic beverages generally on county-owned property, but makes those same 4 exceptions, and then adds a 5th one for authorized special event locations, this one and potentially others in the future, if and only if the board adopts an authorizing resolution, which for this event is your next agenda item. This ordinance, like every other proposed ordinance except the annual budget ordinance, on your first consideration requires a unanimous vote, but it's a unanimous vote of those present. So you're good.
And I would like to say this is a great opportunity to showcase your town. You know, we want to make these tourists welcome, feel welcome and also in a safe environment. And if you'll notice on your agenda abstract where they're all coming from. I mean, right now you've got almost 800 riders and their families coming into town. The hotels are full, you know, for that particular event. And then I think there's going to be about 300 or 400 people camping on the Sainsbury campus. So it is going to be a pretty good event, and I think it's a great opportunity to showcase Berkshire County.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Sorry, let me retract part of the statement I just made. I've looked back at the statute. I did not realize that Commissioner Gentry was not going to be present. What the statute actually says is that an ordinance on its first consideration must be approved by all the members of the Board of Commissioners. So what I suggest is that if you all vote, presumably vote the four of you present to adopt this ordinance, do that today, but then place it back on the agenda for the next meeting, at which a majority vote would adopt the ordinance. And John, the special event here is when?
October the 5th.
And which is the day following the next Board of Commissioners meeting. So that's the time.
Everybody understand that part? We couldn't get her on the phone, or do we need to go that route?
She said that she was not certain that she could be
Okay.
available this morning
That's good.
when her and I spoke last week.
That's good. That's fine. Now that,
Mr. Attorney, just a question. If a commissioner is absent and a vote is taken, doesn't that absent vote count as a yes?
Well, you're certainly under the municipal statutes, it does. That's a good question. Let me look at your rules and then the statute. My recollection off the top of my head is that provision is not in the county statutes, but you may very well be right about that. But the rule, even the municipal statute, is a meeting at which a person is present. If they don't vote, is counted as an affirmative vote. If they were never present, their vote is just simply not counted.
Okay.
But let me run that down.
Mr. Chair,
you know,
I just want to, again, say that, you know, the people that are coming in here, the bicyclists, they're athletes. And they've got to get up the very next morning and pedal. I don't know how far they're going to go, but I certainly don't expect it to be a event where there's going to be people who are getting plastered, if you will, or drunk. I think they're going, if they do, some of them is going to drink water. Yeah, some probably going to have a beverage. And then, as you said, they're going to be shuttled uptown, and they may have more beverages when they go uptown, if that's what they so desire to do. But they're going to be going to bed at a reasonable time. And I certainly think it's a good opportunity for us to showcase our town with all the visitors that'll be coming in. And it's limited access as far as who will be getting the beverages. To be the people who are bicycling, as far as what I can gather from that. So anyway, that's just my comment. I mean, I am, I'll say here, I'm for it. But again, we have to go through the proper protocol of what Mr. Ellis finds out and lets us know when and how we can vote on it. But if our next meeting is going to be after the event, then we may have to have, is there a special called meeting or something of that nature we have to do? That would be my question.
Mr. Chairman, once again, last comment I intend to make, unless there's another good question. But in response to the good question that was asked, the board's adopted rules, namely Rule 23, does say that if a commissioner is present at a meeting and fails to vote, the vote is counted as an affirmative vote. But that does not apply if the commissioner was never present.
okay, any other questions of Mr. Hill? I'd like to echo my sentiments too, along with Commissioner Sims, for you pulling this off. No small feat. It's quite, I think it's an honor for this tour to make a stop in Person County. And that shows the work and effort that you and your staff put into it, and to bring attention by these athletes and their followers and families, as well as the notoriety that Person County will receive. We need more of this sort of thing. So, Mr. Hill, I compliment you and your staff for getting this done and bringing more attention to Person County. Any other questions of Mr. Hill?
What is the date of this?
October 5th.
October 5th. So we would have the county commission meeting on the 4th for that, but you recommend go ahead and making a ceremonial vote this time?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. You don't have to do that, but that is what I recommend.
In good faith, I will make a motion to adopt the updated proposed ordinance with fully knowing that there will be another vote at our October 4th meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, now is that going to include item number 6, Mr. Attorney? Okay, all right. We do have a motion on the floor. Any questions? All in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So we have 4 voting yes. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank y'all.
Best wishes. So we then have approved number 6.
Well, Mr. Chairman, item 6 would be adoption of that resolution would be a separate vote. You don't have the authority yet to adopt that resolution because the new ordinance is not yet effective. Won't be until your next meeting. Let me look at your clerk and see whether she would prefer that you all expressly vote to postpone consideration of that item to your next meeting. That would be the appropriate motion.
Okay, item number 6 then would be a postponement of the
Motion,
resolution.
motion postponed until October 4th meeting.
Questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 7, possible update to automobile graveyard and junkyard ordinance is open.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
morning.
members of the board. So I'm here to talk to you this morning a little bit about our junkyard ordinance. The ordinance regulating automobile graveyards and junkyards in Person County, which I will shorten to junkyard ordinance, was originally adopted in September of 1987 and then readopted on April the 6th of 2015. Since the readoption of the ordinance, there have been 3 text amendments to the ordinance, which include March of 2018. There was an amendment to clearly distinguish the difference between a commercial and a residential junkyard. In March of 2020, we had an amendment which reduced the screening requirements of a junkyard, where the back half and the side half of a property are no longer required to be screened if they're not visible from a public use or public road. And then in May of this year, we did an amendment which required screening of junkyards along private roads in addition to public roads. So staff has received several inquiries regarding our junkyard ordinance over the past year or so. And more recently, we've received several from a gentleman whose parents own property on Cedar Grove Church Road. Staff contacted the attorney's office regarding that case because aside from having too many RVs on the property, which is in fact a zoning violation that we are working on, there was not much that could be done to the property because it is currently enclosed within a 6-foot tall privacy fence. When we contacted the attorney's office, he was not available at that time. So we have actually been working with Kevin Hornick in his office. Ellis has also been looped in on the emails. Kevin's been super helpful and he drafted the memo that was included in your packet. I'm aware that the neighboring property owner's son has probably contacted many of you, if not all of you, regarding the property in question. Aside from the planning department, I believe he has reached out to environmental health, tax inspections, and most recently with DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality with the state, as Kevin was able to provide him with a contact name and email from someone that might be able to assist with environmental concerns regarding that property. So again, Angie and I did go out to the site and we issued a notice of violation for the RVs that were on the property. The owner has indicated that they're now in compliance. The additional RVs have been removed, and we're hopefully getting out there in the next week or so to verify this. In the memo that was included in your packet, the attorney requested guidance on behalf of both the attorney's office and the planning department as to how you would like for us to proceed. If you would like for the junk to be removed, including all of the junk behind the privacy fence, staff can start working on an overhaul of the junkyard ordinance. And in doing so, we can include an amortization schedule for compliance. And so for those of you not familiar with an amortization schedule, it basically gives the property owner a certain amount of time in order to come into compliance with the new ordinance and the new regulations. So property owners are essentially not grandfathered under the old ordinance. The attorney recommended a period of 12 to 18 months for an amortization schedule if we decide to explore that option as part of the text amendment. Staff would be more than happy to go that direction if the board so chooses. I just also wanted you to understand some possible consequences if we decide to go that route. As I know, I'm often asked that question during a public hearing, Lori, what are some of the unintended consequences of this text amendment? So just know that if we go that route, it will apply to all property owners within the county and no one will be grandfathered. We have worked, or I have worked with 3 property owners since I've been with the county to erect a privacy fence to come into compliance with our current ordinance. Some of you are probably familiar. We had one on Lucy Garrett Road. We had another one on Chubb Lake Loop Road, and then the one that we're talking about today on Cedar Grove Church Road. So if staff explores an overhaul of the ordinance to prohibit junk from being stored on residential properties, then those property owners would also have a certain time period, whether it be 12 or 18 months, to come into compliance with the new ordinance. So I realize this is a lot of information, and the purpose of this presentation was really just to provide you with an update on the complaint that, again, I'm sure many of you have been contacted about. You might want to mull this over some and think about a possible text amendment. You might be satisfied with the current junkyard ordinance as it's written today. Staff is just requesting guidance from you, whether it be at this meeting or at a future meeting, on how you would like us to proceed. And if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them.
I forget the property owner's name, this adjacent to Cedar Grove, but they've been after this nuisance for years. So I don't think we need to delay any changes to the rules and regulations regarding junkyards. I think this is something this, these people are really irate. There's leakage of oil. In a previous email that you sent out, you mentioned the fact of these, I forget what you call them, these big buses. People drive around, go on vacation.
RVs. Mm-hmm.
Now,
RVs.
you were gonna have them, my understanding, to take them down to one?
Yes, so aside from the junkyard ordinance and the violations or lack of violations that might pertain to that in the zoning ordinance or planning ordinance rather, it states that you can have one RV on your property that's stored. If you want additional RVs, you have the option of obtaining a special use permit or getting approved for an RV park also that goes through that same process from the board, or removing them. And so the property owner in that case has said that they have dismantled 1 or 2 of them, and I believe they removed maybe 1 or 2 of them. And they indicated that there's 1 remaining on the property. So that is why Angie and I need to go out to verify that they're in compliance. But that would be a zoning ordinance violation separate from the junkyard ordinance. So we were looking at 2 different ordinances to enforce on that property.
biologically speaking, as far as the oil spill leaking onto the adjacent owner's property? That's the EPA issue as well as the county issue.
So not a planning and zoning issue. So we did, and that's why the environmental health department was looped in, that they had talked to the property owner about possible well testing. And then Kevin with the attorney's office gave us a fantastic contact at the state level because we haven't been able to get a person to talk to them. So we were able to get a name and a phone number that I passed along to the gentleman next door, to which he talked to someone and they have forwarded him to a couple of different people. So he is trying to work that route so far as having the state come and look at any possible environmental issues, contaminations or whatnot.
So are you saying that the property owners have not contacted you?
No, the neighboring property owner has. I spoke with him last week to give him an update. We
Okay.
talk regularly. And he
I'm sorry.
has talked with
I have
DEQ.
bad ears, I'm sorry.
He has talked to them. I think he's still talking to additional people at the state to see what, if anything, could be done from the state level, because obviously contamination and soil issues or water issues is kind of out of the purview of planning and zoning.
Okay, thank you. You answered all my questions.
Is it fair to say this particular situation has been monitored and talked about for probably 10 years?
Yes, so this particular situation, I'll pass out, I bought a little spreadsheet with me.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I also wanted to remind you that Lori and I sent an update to you all about this situation on August 19th. So it's not the first time that they're being made aware of this and may be more inclined to move forward at this point than delay.
So, and I believe you might have had this spreadsheet. Angie was able to compile it for us. I'm going back because a lot of these dates obviously predates our employment with the county. So yes, there have been several complaints, several site visits, several letters sent. It did kind of in 2016, I think is actually in 16. Yes, June 21st, 2016, there was compliance originally. And I also have a copy of the letter that was sent by the previous planning director, if you'd like to see that, that let the property owner that they were in compliance with the junkyard ordinance because the 6-foot tall privacy fence was erected around the property to screen everything. Since that letter was sent, we did have, in 2018, the fence was in disrepair, so we did contact the property owner. There was a panel, I think that was down or missing or had issues. They did repair that panel to bring it back into compliance. And then most recently this year, we got more calls about the RVs and the contamination and the other issues. So we went out there and we talked with the neighbor and said that, you know, we can most absolutely address it for the RVs because that's a clear zoning violation. But as the junkyard ordinance is written, it is screened behind the 6-foot tall privacy fence. So it is in compliance with that currently. So,
Could I ask you a question on that fence while we're on that subject? That was installed by the county, paid for by the county. And that property owner did not refund or repay the county, is that correct?
He did make payments.
yes,
on that.
they
He did
came into our
satisfy.
office between the 1st and 5th of every month and paid $100 payment, and they were completed paying off the fence in December of last year. They
And
made
whose
their final payment.
responsibility is it to maintain that fence?
The property owners.
And it's in disrepair at this point.
It is leaning a little bit, but it's leaning in a couple of areas. But right now, it still completely screens the property. So the way our ordinance is written, if it's completely screened behind a 6-foot tall privacy fence, then it's in compliance. So whereas previously back in 2018, you had panels missing, so you had visibility into the property. Right now, there's not that visibility. So technically, right now, it's still in compliance. That's not saying that could change at any time if the wood starts falling off.
I don't know about anyone else, but I visited that location several times been in communications with Mr. Ken Humphreys, who is his son. And it's been very, very nice, very polite. But to a point of a breaking point, I would think maybe. And if any of you were to see this particular site, I don't think you'd have any problem in agreeing with the family that are on both sides of that property. And my opinion is we need to do whatever we can and should as a county to its fullest degree. That would be one comment. The other is, I understand that maybe recently, as recent as last week, someone from the state was there.
Possibly. I talked to Mr. Humphreys in the earlier part of the week, and he was still going to try to reach out to some additional people at the state. I have not spoken with him since then, so I don't know if someone from the state, it's possible, came out there.
Well, Mr. Ken Humphreys is here. I don't know if he cares to comment or not. That's entirely up to you, Mr. Humphreys. If anyone would like to hear from him, if you'd like to comment, totally up to you. Okay.
She said it's true, the state did come out Friday, they are in violation of some issues. She said she was going to issue the thing out probably this week, they will get it out. But it was out, the stuff that's out there, it's not supposed to be out there. It's illegal dumping, is basically what it is. Contact environmental health here, they just proved the opposite. The case has been inspected, it's closed. So I contacted the tax office about all the vehicles, because you're supposed to miss unlicensed vehicle on your property tax. Situation, come out, early back, looked at it, didn't even get out. He just added $5,000 to the property value. What the vehicle was inside. That is inflating the property value, which is not worth $5,000. Follow the law that you got. You have unlicensed vehicles on your property, they should be listed on your property tax. Back before spring came, I counted 20-some vehicles in that fence. Now I count tractors, boats, trailers, which should all be listed on property tax, which they are not. They put property tax on my stuff, I have to pay the value of the property tax. Everybody needs to follow by the same law.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I know I appreciate your comments, and one of the things I'm looking at is, I know we talked about environmental, there's possible some environmental issues there. Certainly, I think that needs to be aggressively looked at and taken care of and not put off at any time. So that one of the questions that we see, question number one is, does the Board of County Commissioners desire the county staff to aggressively seek enforcement of the current junkyard ordinance on the subject property? And I certainly think we need to aggressively go after that. And again, not just because of the vehicles, but I'm really concerned about the environment. There's stuff that's been, the state's out there testing. If they've got some issues with groundwater, then contamination of that, that'll be a big issue. So that's just one of my comments I'd like to make.
Going with the request there for guidance of this board, as Commissioner Sims was talking about, the first one on there, does this board desire for county planning staff to prepare a text amendment to the junkyard ordinance and propose skip down enforcement of the current junk and ordinance on this particular property? You want to have a motion or comment?
If I can put that in the motion, I will put that in a motion.
We have a motion. Any question or comment about that motion? I don't know if, Ms. Oakley, if you need to clarify what you mean there by aggressively seek enforcement.
Are we back to number
Number
one?
one, yeah.
Because we
Number
kind
one.
of comboed 1 and 2. So enforcement, absolutely. Like I said, we are currently exploring the zoning ordinance violations so far as the RVs. The only option right now under our ordinance is to see if they ever paid a $50 licensing fee. There is a very small section in the ordinance that says you do have to pay a $50 fee, although it's not on our fee schedule. It's kind of weird and haphazardly written, but it's in there. And so that's really the only other thing that we could go after under the current ordinance so far as aggressively enforcing from a county planning perspective. And then going on to kind of number 2 is what I had talked about, is that do you want us to prepare a text
Okay.
amendment? and
Now,
propose an
should we take these one at a time if we're going to make motions on those, Mr. Attorney? Yes. So back to the motion. So we'll hold off on that. Any further questions there about the motion and what we're authorizing planning and zoning to do here? Mr.
Yes,
Attorney?
sir, I would like to add one more topic or item of discussion to this. If you've
Same,
got
under
oil-
the same, under number 1?
Yes, sir. If you have oil leakage on your property and it's going on somebody else's property, that should be addressed immediately.
But that's environmental. We're talking about planning and zoning here, aren't we?
That was our question, you know, if the board wants to bring in additional departments, but from a planning and zoning perspective, we were asking, but recognizing there are other issues on the property.
You shouldn't have to have a specialist come and look and see and drill. You can see it. It's very evident.
Okay.
Stevie Wonder could see that.
Agreed. Soil contamination that would fall under someone else's purview. Even
Yeah,
I can go out
see.
there and look at it. It's not a zoning violation.
See, that's what I'm talking
It
about.
could be a
Can't cite it.
DEQ violation.
So I can change my oil in my yard and dump it. It doesn't affect my county property or my citizens. who
I'm
live
saying
inside.
it would impact a different
Same
department.
difference. Same difference. It's got tractors, trailers, whatever is leaking.
Okay. Any further clarification, Mr. Attorney?
No, sir.
Okay, we do have a motion.
And may I ask for clarification on that motion would you be explicit of what that motion involves?
My motion was number 1, does the board of commissioners desire county planning staff to aggressively seek enforcement of the current junkyard ordinance on the subject property? That was my motion, to aggressively seek enforcement of that.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And any further comments there, Ms. Oakley, on item number 2 that we're requesting, or you're requesting guidance for? Do we want to prepare any text amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to talk to Mrs. Oakley, what she said at the start of her presentation regarding overhauling the junkyard and the ones that are grandfathered in. You're potentially having residents who have never received a complaint in which they would be subject to receiving a complaint. So it would be opening up another can of worms with that. But I'd like to talk with Ms. Oakley to try to, if we are going to look at a text amendment that would have the least minimum of impact for those who are not receiving complaints, but could receive complaints if we overhaul the junkyard ordinance in what she said. So I think that needs to be carefully looked at.
Commissioner Puryear, were you saying carefully look at the ordinance that we're
The
getting?
text amendment,
Text amendment?
because it sounded, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like if we added a text amendment it would overhaul the ones that are already grandfathered in, and
Right.
am I correct in assuming that?
You are correct. In order to rewrite this, that we would be able to enforce it on the property in question, we would have to go basically, at least right now at the top of our head and talking with the attorney, we would have to go the amortization schedule, which would impact those 2 current property owners that we had talked about, that we worked on a couple years ago of bringing them into compliance. They would no longer be in compliance. And they would have to, remove all junk from their property within a certain time period. So definitely, I mean, we can put our thinking caps on and try to see if there's any other solution that's less aggressive, still aggressive, but maybe less aggressive, where we would not impact those property owners who worked so hard to install their fences and come into compliance, and now telling them a year or two later that they're not in compliance.
Yeah, I think, we just approved number one, and we possibly look at, I mean, they are in violation of that particular ordinance, and to put some more teeth into it to make it more enforceable. But we just approved that one right there. Number two was, we need to put our thinking caps on that we're focusing on this property, but we're putting minimum impact on other residents that have already come into compliance.
So for this particular incident or situation, then you're okay to move forward with that? Is that what you're saying, and lead out the others?
Well, I'm just saying we need to have some, I don't think we're prepared to give a direction as to to move forward with a text amendment without knowing what we want in that text amendment.
Mhm.
And so what I'm saying is, from dialogue from this board, including all of us, and I would like to be involved with that, to be involved with that. And then once we came to a possible solution, that it's something that we all can agree on, and that would have a minimum impact on other residents in the county, because right now we're focusing on one property right now.
Mhm.
So would you like for staff to draft something to bring back for the board's
I think
consideration?
the commissioners need to get a better understanding of what's being proposed here before
Sure.
we instruct staff to start drafting a text amendment. And
We can put some thoughts together and then get some further direction from the board so that we can get our head around impacts to other properties, because we get a lot of complaints and are often telling them that they're grandfathered in because the junk has been in existence prior to the date of the ordinance. So we can take a look at that and then bring back a draft for the board to consider at a later date. I would like to say, on this particular property, the number of county resources that have been spent on addressing this property, I think I've had almost every county department involved in some way, from animal control, law enforcement, mental health services, planning and zoning, environmental health, and this has been going on for a decade. I mean, it has really been an expenditure of resources to even get to this point with these property owners. And we've got a long ways to go.
Okay, so no action at this point. Back to Catherine, and the next meeting, the 5th, the 4th, is that okay?
I would please just say a future meeting and not
A future
pick a
meeting.
specific meeting, because we are
Oh, you
getting
have
kind of
other
busy
things
in
to
our
do?
department. And so it might take us a little while to compile some information for you.
Yeah, okay.
And for the newer commissioners, the reason I'm bringing this up, and I want you to fully understand it, I've been involved with these. I actually helped the Humphreys with that 6-foot fence back in 2015, 2016, get to that. But we have also had different complaints past this that don't involve this, other people's complaints, and that we work to resolutions for. And while we're trying to identify a solution for this particular property, we don't want to have a negative impact on other people's properties that have came into compliance, that are within that. So that's what I'm looking at.
Understand what you're saying, but just because my yard was cleaned yesterday doesn't mean it's gonna be clean today. So do we have a team that goes around and inspects these junkyards?
It's complaint driven.
It is complaint driven. So if we receive a phone call,
How
or
often? Oh, you just have to get a phone call?
we get a
before you
phone
go?
call or an email or office
Okay.
visit.
Okay. As long as it's followed up on.
And I agree with Mr. Perrier, totally agree with him. It's just been an ongoing situation there, going on years. and expended county funds and time that could be spent on something more productive and somewhere else. But every time they take a look there, do an investigation, there's a loophole somewhere. They seem to either find a loophole or they totally ignore. So it's been going on entirely too long. So whatever we can do to eradicate that particular situation, I'm all in favor of. But yeah, we should get some more information at a future meeting.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Oakley.
Thank you.
Item number 8, permitting process improvement plan update, Manager York.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is another conversation that's been ongoing for several months. We are happy to bring you an update today on the developmental services permitting process that we have been trying to make improvements on since May, I think, or April from the Home Builders Association meeting. So we have quite a team in place that have been addressing these issues. Both Catherine and myself have been working on this. And then with us today, we have Dale Tillman from Inspections, Janet Clayton and Harold Kelly with Environmental Health, Lori Oakley and Angie in Planning. And we would like to share with you kind of where we are, what we're doing and how it's going. So the last presentation that we gave to you was back on May 3rd. And at that time, the building permits were being issued in approximately 20 days. Planning and zoning were turning around land use applications, site plans, and stormwater plan reviews in approximately 1 to 2 days. And environmental health site evaluations were taking approximately 10 weeks to complete. So since that time, staff has been providing updates to the board on our progress that we're making in these departments. I gave you a written progress report back on May 21st. And at that time, building inspections were being conducted within 1 to 2 business days, with the turnaround time for the permit, including the plan reviews, down to 14 business days from 20. And the express plan reviews were just being rolled out. You'll remember we talked about allowing plans that had engineered documents with them going to the front of the line. So after that, on June 15th, we provided another written update to the board, trying to keep you all informed of what we were up to. At this point, the turnaround time for a building permit with inspections had dropped to 10 business days. And then in August, Chairman Powell sent an email to myself and the board members expressing his expectations for the department's permitting process. So today's report seeks to follow up on the improvements that are being implemented, address the permit timeframes that can be expected as we move forward. Let's see. Okay, so back in May, May 3rd board meeting, the Board of County Commissioners authorized 2 new full-time positions to try to help get ahead of some of this turnaround time. Environmental Health had an environmental health specialist position, and we are proud to say that we were able to hire a qualified and an experienced employee. He began work with us on August 30th, and he was authorized by the state to begin site evaluations on September 9th. So we have just started down that road. Don't have a lot of results to show you at this point, but we're happy to say that we're moving in a good direction there. Inspections was authorized to hire a chief building inspector. We had 1 qualified candidate, and he declined the offer of employment. We received no other qualified applicants. As we said before, there is a shortage and a hiring challenge for inspectors across the state. This is not unique to Person County, but we are struggling to find a qualified applicant pool. We decided to revamp that position to a level 2 inspector, which would allow us to redistribute the workload, alleviate some of the overtime that our staff are incurring to try to meet demands, and to complete plan reviews more quickly. Recruitment for the level 2 closed on the 9th of September. We received 6 applicants at that point, and none of them met the minimum qualifications for the job. So at this point, we're considering our options. We may restructure the position to try to attract applicants and address the needs of our business. We are considering a level 1 inspector. We're considering a plans examiner, a customer service rep, or other roles that could help improve operations. Also, back on May 3rd, the board authorized financial assistance to allow us to contract with a temporary employee to help provide some assistance. Again, Inspections was unable to find a qualified inspector who was available. And since Environmental Health was able to onboard an experienced employee, the utilization of a contract employee became unnecessary at that point. So an update on our express plan reviews for inspections. This was implemented in May. Again, it's for residential builders who obtained engineered plans. Those applications moved to the front of the line. And so far today, we've had about 10 plans utilize this process. And the feedback that we have gotten from builders has been pleased. They have been pleased with the faster turnaround. So the feedback has been positive. I did want to clarify, I think Chairman Powell asked me this at one point, why this was only applying to residential. And plan review times have not been an issue for commercial properties or projects at any time, because those plans come from an architect often before a contractor is even selected. So this was just a residential challenge that they were facing. And we also wanted to mention that there is an option for expedited plan reviews in environmental health as well. If applicants use a private engineer or a soil scientist, that expedites the process for our staff, and they're able to get their permit issued sooner as well. As you know, we also implemented a software system in our development services departments, which we call Intergov. Intergov is available now for customers to submit their permits electronically online. They may also submit payment, correspond with staff, update information, and track the status of their application. We have had to temporarily halt planning and zoning online applications because we are modifying their forms. They are issuing permits and accepting payments through Intergov, though. We do have a required system update planned for September 23rd to Intergov. It's rolling out within Tyler Technologies, and we will, once we get through that, staff is planning to come back at a future meeting to demo the Intergov system with you all at a board meeting so you can see how that works, what our customers are facing, and what that looks like. I wanted to touch a little bit on the time frame, since that had been the primary complaint that you all were receiving. So on inspections, our inspections timeframes, for issuing a building permit, we have now been down to 10 business days. So we are from 20 business days down to 10 business days. Again, we've mentioned that if applications are incomplete or if they're missing information, we do have to correct those before they can receive approval, and that sometimes slows down the process. We're also seeing that there's a seasonal cyclical process with permits and applications. So we are seeing fewer applications being submitted this time of year than what we saw in the spring at the height of that cycle. So once plans are reviewed and approved, inspections are able to schedule next day inspections. We have contacted neighbors. We have looked at lots of data for other departmental inspections, and we feel really good about being able to provide this level of service. We do have to incur overtime, however, to make this happen. And so we're hoping that when we eventually are able to get that position filled, we'll be able to lessen some of the overtime and make this sustainable for our staff. On the permitting timeframes beyond inspections, environmental health is a challenge for us. Since April, the average timeframe for completing a site evaluation has been reduced from 10 weeks to 7 weeks. our goal is to issue improvement permits within 30 calendar days. So that is the goal that we've set for ourselves. Doing this research, I was made aware that state general statutes do require improvement permits to be issued within 60 to 90 calendar days. So we are actually currently meeting the requirement in state statutes for the turnaround on environmental health site improvement permits. Although these permits, these site evaluations for new construction, the ones that you're hearing about, are a priority of the Home Builders Association, this is actually a medium priority for the Board of Health. These site evaluations require field work. They're very time consuming for our staff. We have to schedule these around other requirements such as inspections and investigations of existing infrastructure that pose threats to public health if not addressed in a timely manner. So think of failing systems. Those have to take a priority for our staff to address those before some of these new construction. And so that is part of the disconnect, we think, with expectations, is that we have other priorities that do have to take precedence for them. And then planning and zoning, our other partner over there, when all the paperwork is correct, land use application, site plans, stormwater plans, and a zoning permit can be issued within 2 to 3 business days. As with other steps in the permitting process, as we have said, if something is missing or submitted incorrectly, that timeframe does get adjusted depending on how soon the applicant revises and submits their corrections. But we are pleased with that turnaround too, and hope that that meets the board's expectations. So I'm going to have Catherine come up and walk us through a graphic of our timeframes for permitting and kind of explain the goals that we have set and where we are in reaching each of those goals. And I have the clicker, Catherine. So you have a copy of this in front of you at your seat, which might be easier to see, but we're trying to color coordinate it to help us explain what we're looking at.
So in this graphical representation of our permitting process all the way through the developmental services departments, the permitting process typically starts out with an environmental health. We have noted there that the time frame for those issuing those permits has been reduced since the spring. It is currently at about 7 weeks, and we do have the internal goal of getting that down to 30 days, which is well within the state requirement. Going to the next step in the process within planning and zoning, they have over time consistently been within that 2 to 3 day target business day turnaround for issuing permits once the paperwork is completed. And then the final step in the process is with the inspections department. And currently their review or the issuance of the permits, once the paperwork is complete, is within that 7 to 10 day business day timeframe, which is the internal target that has been set. So you can see from April, if you look at the bar graph, that entire time frame has been condensed from, we were looking at on average about 70 business days down to less than 50 currently. And then our target would be closer to the 35-day business day turnaround for the complete process. So we just wanted to let the board know where we are with that now. We have seen improvements. Again, some of that is related to the season that we're in and receiving fewer permit requests at this time than we were in the spring. But we've also been able to dedicate additional environmental health resources to this process. We had one employee who was in an intern status as of April, and then received full approval for site evaluations at that time. And then we have now just recently onboarded another staff member. So we have also gone through the bulk of the Intergov implementation, which was taking a lot of our staff time. So that has freed up some attention that was previously directed elsewhere to resources to be able to address the permitting timeframes. So in looking at this particular graph and seeing that our overall target is, I think it's at about 34 days when you add all of that up. And again, that is business days. So that is close to 7 weeks for the entire process. About 4 of those in environmental health, a few days in planning and zoning, and 1 to 2 weeks in inspections. We wanted to find out from the board if that target is supported by you all, if that is what you view as realistic in being able to utilize our staff resources to meet the needs of our community.
Board member comments.
Environmental health, current 7 weeks. I know our target was 30 days. Comparison to other counties in the area, are they 30 days? Or I know what we say the state general
Right.
statute says 60 to 90 days, but where are we in comparison with the other counties? Similar to us, not Wake and Durham, the big ones, but I mean, similar to us, where are we at with that?
And you've looked at that data a little more closely. My understanding is the 30 days is more in line. with
Yeah,
others.
actually, Janet was able to poll most of the health directors across the state. She got a really good response, and we're in line with them. There were some that were better, some that were smaller, but we were not an anomaly in any way. We felt like we were right on track and that the 30 days was a good goal for us. There are some who are taking much longer. There are some who do not meet the 60 to 90 day required turnaround, but we feel like, we're somewhere in the middle to be fair about that. But I think the memo that I got from the chairman was laying out an expectation of the whole process being completed within 20 days. And that is just not feasible for that, given that 30 days just for the environmental health piece is a lofty goal for us to be able to meet.
And that was my next question. Is that 30 days actually attainable? I mean, can we hit that goal?
We think once we're able to get our staff member, our new staff, the environmental health specialists up to speed, and as we start moving through Intergov and are able to utilize some of that technology, we're hoping that that is obtainable.
And manager, that was 20 working days. Right?
Okay. I can pull the memo, but maybe so.
That's what I said, 20 working days.
Okay. 30 calendar days is
Yeah.
is just, again, just the environmental health piece, which is our big, our longest process at this point. If we were just talking about inspections, and it wasn't real clear to us which piece you were referencing, but if we were just talking about inspections and we're able to provide that in 7 to 10 business days, I feel really good about that if that was the primary concern.
And I may have asked the question too early. Maybe we should go through the rest of the information and then circle back around to the timeframes. Would that be
That'd be good. Thank
good?
you.
Okay.
Am I supposed to point this at any one particular thing? There we go.
Okay, so just a quick recap. I just want to remind you of the challenges that our staff have faced over the last 18 months or so, the 2020 calendar year and the beginning of 2021. They have been working diligently with an outside consultant, as well as the resources from Tyler to implement Intergov, but it has taken quite a bit of our staff time in all of the 3 departments that are involved to learn that system and to work on configuring it to meet the needs of our county, which are similar to other counties where they've implemented Intergov, but we do have also some unique processes that we've adapted to. So staff have been pulled away from their regular duties in the interest of implementing Intergov, which we do expect to create efficiencies as we move forward for both staff and our customers. So we are at a point, as Heidi explained, where that system is in place. We do have to do a required upgrade here soon, but then we will be over that hurdle to where we have customers using that system, our staff are using the system, and we will continue to refine it to better meet our needs as we go on. So but it will not require the intensity of time from our staff that the implementation process has required. You are all familiar with the COVID-19 pandemic and how that has affected our staff resources across departments. We've dealt with employee illness and people needing to be away from work, people needing to be away to care for family members who've been ill or just needing to quarantine due to exposure. We've had staff out juggling situations with their school-aged children. We have set up teleworking arrangements, which in some cases have created time away from the office, created efficiencies where staff can get work done in an environment where they can be fully focused without distractions that sometimes arise in the office. But overall, we have had to adapt the way that we are working over the last 18 months. So that has impacted our ability to respond in certain situations.
I could also mention, I just want to remind you that environmental health is a division of the health department. And so when Janet needs employees to work at vaccination clinics or at testing sites, our environmental health staff was taken away from their duties of environmental health to help support the needs of the health department, which is perfectly reasonable, but that does create a backlog. And so when you were hearing from the Home Builders Association at that time of year, it very much felt like a perfect storm with all of these challenges being on the plates of employees to respond to other priorities.
In the cyber incident, we are at a point of recovery from that, but there was a period of time when employees did not have access to the technology they needed. They were having to revamp processes in the midst of that. And in addition, you will see when we get to the reporting examples, we are still missing some of that historical information, particularly in inspections. So that's impacting our ability now to do some of that benchmarking in comparison to a year ago or earlier than that, because some of that data is no longer available due to the cyber incident. We've had increased development activity periodically, as we talked about those cycles for development, and the pandemic we saw statewide just kind of the pressures that it put on this sector as people sought to make home improvements and also relocate to more rural areas, and just patterns definitely shifted and oftentimes in our favor in terms of development as a result of the pandemic. Staff turnover and recruitment. We had a long time environmental health employee retire with 30 plus years of service. So we've been onboarding a new employee who is getting up to speed on departmental operations. I mentioned we had an intern who became certified in April of 2021 as an environmental health specialist. So now he's fully capable of doing this field work, site evaluations. And then our new employee has just come on board and certified September 9th. And Heidi did mention the recruitment challenges that we've had in inspections, and we continue to evaluate that to come up with a solution there. So I just wanted to kind of set that stage and just explain kind of what staff has been through over the last 18 months, but the picture is looking better as we move forward, and we are in a better place now. So additional information and next steps, part of your request for information pertain to after hours response. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of how staff is handling that. And then feel free to give us any other guidance or suggestions that you may have. The county does have established office hours where staff is available to customers Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. We try to be as responsive as possible, phone, email, walk-in. There are times when staff cannot immediately answer the phone because they are meeting with a customer in person, and we encourage in the event that citizens reach a voicemail that they leave a message so staff can get back to them as soon as possible. Examples in inspections, our inspections director, Dale Tillman, does have a county cell phone. He does take calls, respond to text. He gets Facebook messages. He tries to respond to those critical messages after hours as soon as possible, but he does not take all calls or respond to all messages outside of business hours. Our expectation for staff is not that they are on 24/7, that they do have some downtime, personal time where they are not having to be tied into work continuously. But our staff do adapt their hours. We have inspectors who will come in and do early morning inspections, whether that's in an overtime capacity or whether they can leave earlier in the day when they do adjust their schedule. But that is to meet contractors' needs who might need early morning inspections or inspections later in the day. And there are times that they do respond on weekends as needs arise. And likewise with environmental health, there's not as much of a demand for those services after hours, but they also are responsive when there is a need to do that. But there are times when we're reaching the end of the workday where employees are trying to manage their workload and get high priority items done. So there may be times when a voicemail gets returned the next morning or something else, has to get shifted to the next day because they can't get to that by the end of the workday. Customer service surveys, we have had one available in the inspections department for several years. We have now we have reached out to our customers to ask them to submit current feedback through that survey. It is now being included in the signature line for when we issue permits, encouraging them to provide feedback to us through that survey. So we're hoping that we can get some good examples of what our staff is doing well, so we can provide them with that feedback and concerns that are out there so that we can work on addressing those. So we went back about 6 months to reach out to people who have recently received services, and we'll continue to do that going forward and monitoring those responses so we can stay on top of the feedback that we're getting. We did get a Manpower Study conducted by the state, and we just received those results here in the last week or so, and this pertains specifically to environmental health. That study identified a need currently with the way that we're doing business of needing 2.6 FTEs, full-time equivalent positions dedicated to wastewater and water, on-site wastewater and our well programs. So we, as you know, we had 2 full-time FTEs, and now we have added the 3rd FTE. So we're now above the 2.6 mark, but our staff is not completely dedicated to those services. They are also juggling other duties along with those. In addition, there's a required monitoring program that we had put on hold that needs to be reinstated. And with that program in place, the state is actually saying that we need 3.4. So once we get those activities reinstated, we are at a deficit again in terms of staffing according to the state. So we are going to continue to keep an eye on that, but may circle back around to you at a later date with an update and a possible need, again, to enhance the resources within environmental health for those activities. Customer service improvements, we are focusing on that. As you know, the departments within that building are set up as a one-stop shop for developmental services. So we're just looking at how we can improve that workflow for our customers. Intergov is a way where they can go into the system, submit their information, and have it flow through the process, kind of hands off on their part, but they can look in and see status updates. Not everybody is using that, though. We're still having people come to the office with their paper applications. And then staff is having to enter those into the system. We will continue to see how Intergov evolves and how many people are utilizing that. But we have discussed whether it would be good to have a customer service representative at the front desk, kind of the counter within the lobby area of that building, which would be kind of the primary point of contact for our customers who would become familiar with all 4 departmental operations within that department, be able to ask basic questions, be able to help people utilize the Intergov system, but also accept paper applications and enter them into the system as needed, and be that point of contact to help facilitate moving everything through the process. So that's something on the table that we're considering in terms of customer service improvements, but we're also just working to make sure that no matter where they go, that first point of contact is providing a friendly face, a helpful face, and we are looking at ways that we can increase our follow-up in the event that applications are not complete at first. If they end up needing additional information, that we're keeping track of those, and although we're waiting on the customer, that we're looking at ways where we can do follow-up to help facilitate a quicker response on their part. I'll go through some examples of reporting on the next slide, but we are in the process of installing kiosks in the lobby over there so that customers can use those to submit their applications online and get staff support in doing that. So you do have some examples of reporting in your packet, which you have seen the reports from inspections and environmental health previously. These are, in a lot of cases, kind of just reporting out on workload data, number of inspections in various categories, fees that we're receiving. Environmental health does have some turnaround times on their report. For inspections, it is hard to make a year-to-year comparison because we are currently missing that detailed data from last year due to it having been, some of it being wiped out due to the cyber event. So this is the way we have been doing reporting, and we are open to improving that as we move forward. We expect to get more information, more useful information out of Intergov. It takes staff a very long time to manually compile these reports currently. So we are exploring how the data is organized in Intergov and the reports that come out of that system, and what information might be more useful for us to track and share with you on a monthly basis. There are some limitations to that right now because we're just now getting information into that system. So it's going to take a while for us to build up that database for historical comparisons, but we're starting to see the real-time data in that system. And as more and more people utilize Intergov, the timeframes will be more meaningful in that system. Right now, they're not completely accurate because staff is manually entering some applications and then issuing permits on the same day. So it looks like a one-day timeframe, whereas we may have received that paper application earlier, and just the workflow led for it getting entered into the system in the process of issuing the permit. So you've got a couple of examples of reports that we can get directly out of the system that you may like to see on a routine basis. A lot of counties provide this information on their websites for the public to view. But there is a detailed report of all the different types of permits issued, with property owner information, fees associated with it and collected each month. And then there's a summary report as well by the type of permit that's been issued. So this is information that we can get directly out of the Intergov system right now with the push of the button. So we would like to hear from you in terms of any other information that you would like to see, which may need to be manually tracked if we are trying to determine how long we're waiting on customers to submit their data, because we're not submitting complete applications because that's not captured within the system. So I know that's a lot of information that I just threw at you. Heidi and I are both, glad to take any questions that you have of us, and or welcome your guidance as far as how to move forward and continue improving the process.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say, I want to thank Inspections Department and all of those involved. And we are seeing some improvements in the goals. Certainly, the environmental one obviously is out there. But I want to say I appreciate what you're doing. We need to continue to move forward. And I appreciate the reports that have been given to us here to look at. So, and again, we got a new person that's now there. It gives you gives you 3 FTEs. And certainly we'll have to look at it down the road. As you said, the states says something about 3.4 with the monitoring program. So anyway, thank you again for the report. Appreciate it.
Chairman Powell, I'd like to address Ms. York. Thank you for clarifying the turnover time frame of the environmental health department. That was a question I was going to bring up later. As far as the person who sits at the desk, how long is this lady or person, there used to be a lady there, customer rep?
Are we
How
talking
long,
about?
how long have we been missing this?
Oh, in
position?
environmental health?
Yeah.
We're not missing anyone. We have a new employee. So
So-
she's been there for several months now. So she is coming up to speed. It's just been a training process. So we have somebody there.
But
And
it
there
was
wasn't much of a
absent for
vacancy.
while, correct?
I think it was a
We didn't-
short vacancy.
Right.
I
I
don't
think
know.
what Catherine had mentioned in terms of having a customer service rep up front would be a different position. We do have somebody who is supporting environmental health, who's been with us for a few months now. So she is in place. We're finding that,
She sits in an office,
Right.
right,
but we've got an open desk. for
we have
customer
open desk.
representation.
Right. Right. We do have some staff from inspections who rotate filling that position
Right.
up there, but they are often in the back or processing plans.
Right.
And their primary job is not to sit up there and be a customer service rep, but we are thinking in terms of, how to provide the best customer service experience for our residents. And perhaps we would like to consider down the road, having a customer service rep who is there to kind of handhold the applicant through the entire process, follow up on their application, answer questions, keep them posted about the status, and sort of an enhanced level of service. So that's something we're considering at some point.
We had
Yes.
it for years and it's non-existent now. So that, to me, I think would be very beneficial to the contractors or those who want to question the process of how I go about
Right.
doing this, that on my property. I do like the idea that we need to fill that seat again.
Mhm.
I had a third question, but it has went away. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would only like to add that what prompted me to write that memo to the manager was the number of concerns, questions, complaints that this board does receive from the processes that we're talking about. And I think we all need to remember that we work for the people. And these two departments are extremely important to the growth of Person County in residential as well as commercial, and or even correcting some issues or problems that exist within the building processes or infrastructure, all those things. And the situation with COVID, I get it. I understand. I have no problem with that whatsoever. That it's still with us. It's not totally gone. And then we had the cyber incidents, and we haven't recovered from that yet. I totally get all that. I don't have any problem with that. I would only remind our department heads and even on up to the manager that each department is has their own set of goals and objectives, or they should. I think they're posted, and to abide by those and take a look at those when they're working with their staff, and then in turn work with the people that are requesting permits or approvals of whatever they may be. So just to utilize the staff that we have and the resources, they're limited. I understand all that. But to do the most and best we can with what we have is, I think would be the, my opinion, and I believe this board as well. But again, we fully understand the limitations. And so it's not a criticism, it's maybe a critiquing that we're looking at. And we just seek to improve. And I see some improvements here from what the manager has responded with. A few things we probably will need to tweak as we go a little further down the road. And I know it's early on, but the monthly reports, I think they are what they are. So let's begin by reporting those monthly so that we'll have a clear understanding of what's going on. And maybe too, for me, I don't know about the other board members, but when we print out these reports, could we make the font a little larger so that we don't have to get a Hubble telescope to be able to read those things? Sometimes they're very difficult to read and get some comparison, but again, I know most of the staff, and I know they're hardworking people. I don't, here again, I compliment everybody. Again, this is not a criticism process. It's a critiquing that we think might improve the services provided to our citizens and contractors and whomever make requests to these departments. So I wanted to make sure everybody understood that part from me. But again, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I forgot I remembered the item, the kiosk. I
Yes,
think Dale will probably agree with me here. A lot of the older contractors, they don't like using the kiosk. They want a person to talk to.
yes,
So they're reluctant to use.
right. We are aware of that. Of course, with Intergov, contractors can utilize the system from their business or their home if they'd like and not even have to come in. But we know that there are those who do want to come in. We
Right.
know that there are varying levels of, access to technology, but also comfort level with the technology. So it is a benefit that we're seeing to be able to get the applications into the system directly by the contractor so that they have their account set up and they can follow the process through the system. So we will be able to provide that in-person support if they would like to take advantage of the kiosks, but we are still accepting paper applications as well. That just requires staff to then have to enter the information, which can be time consuming as well. So we'd like to move in the direction of easing into as full use as possible to the system that we've invested in.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that conclude your report?
That does conclude. We know this isn't the end of our process. So we are planning to come back with another update. And as I mentioned, walking you through the Intergov with a demonstration of that system in the coming months. So stay tuned for more.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
As for chairman's report, I have only maybe one thing I would like to say in regard, and I base that on Mr. Hill's report earlier with what he and his staff and his board has come up with for the bike tour here. Along that line, and I was thinking of the number of committees and boards that we have working in Person County that are primarily made up of volunteers. They're volunteering their time and their expertise to a particular board or committee to work for the people of Person County. They work very hard. They're very dedicated in what they do and very serious about the decisions they make. And I just would like to mention that fact and compliment them, because we have the Chamber of Commerce, the EDC Commission, Roxborough Uptown Development Group, I believe they call themselves. I know who they are, maybe not the right name. Tourism and Airport Commission, just to mention a few. And I know I'm not touching on all those, but these are individual committees, and some have their own individual boards, and they work hard together. And they feed information back to this board when and if needed to make progress in Person County. So I compliment them for what they do. Some of those aren't well known or advertised, but they do meet and they make good, sound decisions related to progress in Person County. So I'd like to compliment all those fine, hardworking people. Thank you. Manager York.
I just wanted to mention that staff is looking at vaccination requirements. The information that we are receiving from the federal government and the state is ever changing. We have been working for the last 2 weeks on just trying to interpret what this means for county employees, particularly in light of recruitment and retention challenges of staff. So we are just kind of in a holding pattern. We have not implemented any requirements at this point. We're continuing to receive information as it is ever changing and taking that into consideration before we make any decisions. So if you're hearing rumors, we have not implemented any requirements now, but of course we're looking at it, and we are seeing lots of local governments, particularly the larger, more urban ones, requiring vaccinations or weekly testing of their employees. Some of those have already put that into place. Some of those are putting that into place later in October and into November. We're also seeing a lot of information out there from other organizations and managers who are requiring it as conditions of employment for employees. We have not implemented any of that at this time, but are just continuing to receive information and consider our options.
Thank you. Commissioner Puryear.
No report.
Commissioner Palmer.
Question, Ms. York, does that include county commissioners?
I have not seen any guidance on that at all.
Thank
at
you.
this point.
Is that all, Mr. Palmer?
Yes, sir.
So, okay. Mr. Sims.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sims.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'll apologize a little bit for the dialogue between me and Mr. Seep. He was here earlier. I'm not offended by what Mr. Seep is saying, but and he questioned due diligence just as I questioned him. But I want to reiterate that I'm not on any ATC advisory board, and I have not attended any meetings. I can't help what documents he has or where he gets. I know he pulls a lot of emails from different places. I went to the source. I went to PCC and asked them about an advisory board. Am I on it? And the reason they erased my name off of it was, as he said earlier, I was on the Mechatronics advisory board, not the ATC. But in his question, I will, because I know Mr. Seep is listening, I will ask about the any land being donated to PCC. I'll see what I can get on that. I did not ask them when I talked to Beth Towson. I talked about me being on the ATC advisory board. The next thing I want to say, talk about, switch gears, is I know Commissioner Gentry is not here, but I would like to know what is going on with the EDC task force that she's leading. Last meeting on our county website was May 19th. Have they taken a break? You know, have they been working on something? I asked for a task force report to be on the agenda, and Commissioner Gentry emailed the commissioners and stated that she would not have one. She would have one in November. It seems to be a long time for a report back to county commissioners. Have they not met since May? And I guess my question is, do we still need a task force? We have some very good people on this task force. They volunteered their time. And I just hope that we're not wasting their time on this board. The past weekend, I attended ribbon cutting for the business after hours at Empire Egyptians. I want to say congratulations for them for joining the Roxbury Area Chamber of Commerce. Look, I wish them many years of success. I also attended a celebration at Cole's Pharmacy for 65 years of being in business in Roxbury. What a great accomplishment. They had a great turnout. They shared that celebration with the community for 65-cent hot dogs. And congratulations to James Carver and his family for their longevity in business. And I thank them, the family, Cole's Pharmacy, for their contributions they have made to our community. Thank you.
No other comments? We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any discussion about that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no motion. Thank you all.